Okay, hello, Ignite. Can you all hear me? You can hear me at the back, nodding. Okay, we're halfway through, lots of learning, lots to take on, and hopefully some room for some more through the week. My name is Baxter Willis. I'm not from around here. I am from London, and I'm come to talk to you today about moving to Yammer. The key word is consideration. There's a couple of things. If you're planning a move, if you're in the early stages of a move to Yammer, this is going to be useful for you. If you're looking to migrate from an existing social platform, whether that be an old instance of Yammer, whether that be Jive, whether that be Chatter, whether that be Socialcast, this is going to be really useful for you. I've only got 15 minutes, max 20, and I'm going to move through it pretty quickly. Here's what you can expect. So, one, the pleasantries of who I am. Number two, is Yammer the right tool? So if you're moving from an existing platform or content really from anywhere in your digital workplace, is Yammer the right tool for that? Number three, should you migrate? As in, do you just start and launch Yammer? Do you do a turn off the old system, or do you migrate some content and think about that? Number four is how to migrate. So I'm going to go just a tiny bit technical on this one about a migration tool that you could use to move from one platform to another. And that includes Yammer to Yammer migration, which I know a few of you are here to see. And then the last is what makes a good launch, which I'll talk about a change and adoption piece. So it's really brief. It's mainly consideration. If you go home and all you take is these 6 bullet points around thinking move to Yammer, then you won't go too far wrong. The pleasantries, my name is Baxter Willis. I work in a migration team for a Office 365 or Microsoft 365 consultancy. We're mostly based in the UK. We've got some Microsoft Gold partnership, but in an event like that, it doesn't really mean much. Anyone worth their salt coming here should have a couple of these badges under their name. But what makes us kind of special is we're a Yammer adoption specialist, and we're the only consultancy with that accreditation in Europe. And also, we have a big number of us who are ProSci Change Management qualified, any senior consultants in our team. So we have a deeply technical side arm of the organization, and we have an organization that manages the migrations and adoption and change. And someone told me that 70% of the attendees here are from the US. And so if you're thinking England's too far and the time zone's too different and I can't understand this man's accent, we also have Valorum recently joined our network, so we're owned by the same parent company, and I know they're a bigger name in these parts than we are. So we're all owned by the same Italian family, essentially. Okay, moving on. Is Yammer the right tool? So you've come here and you've thought, all right, actually I've got this old platform. So a good example is Jive, where you might have groups and places on Jive, and you think, actually, Yammer's a social tool, let's move it to Yammer. But the content you have today on one system might not just be transferable to one system. You might have content on whatever you're using today that's applicable in this teamwork space, where I've got teams, collaboration, but you might have content also that goes in Yammer. So it's a simple exercise, but you need to discover where you think the content that you've got fits. And just because it's coming from the same tool does not mean all of your content from what you have today needs to go into Yammer on this all-company space with SharePoint, or goes into Teams. If you spoke, I know today we're celebrating 10 years of Yammer. If anyone was at the sort of Yammer keynote yesterday morning, if you spoke to Yammer if you spoke to Yammer around 7 years ago, they'd probably tell you that Yammer could do some of this, and even some of this over here. But I think now we have the realization that we're fully in the Office 365 suite, that there's better tools for this teamwork and collaboration. So I am going to focus on what it takes to move to Yammer, but just remember that there's options to migrate into this space and split what you're migrating to. So we've had that conversation. We're like, actually, yeah, let's focus on Yammer. I've got an amount or a tool that I want to move over to that social platform. I should also add that from yesterday's announcement, you're going to see more connectivity. I can see some frowns. They're all connected, they're Office 365, but for the end user, anything more substantial than your online status, this is how we see that set of tools connecting. So, if I buy a new social tool, and I want to move from it, there's a couple of things I can do. And this is a really common one, is I turn off my old one. I tell people in a month's time it's going to turn off. And then really what I mean is in 2 months' time, it's going to turn off. And then what I really mean is in 3 months' time, it's going to turn off. And then I turn it off, and we get Yammer. And that does work. That is not a terrible way. Migrating content is a big commitment, and this is genuinely the right answer for some clients. So 5 years ago, I think they were the first FTSE 100 to fully migrate to Office 365 is Diageo. If you've been here at the Expo Depot, you would have sampled some of their products. They're the largest alcohol company, spirits company in the world. So Smirnoff, Gordon's, Pimm's, all those lovely things. And they turned off Newsgator commenting. And they just switched on Yammer. And they have an incredibly thriving Yammer network. So they did something right. However, for them, the commenting on articles was not important enough to warrant kind of a big migration program. And they didn't feel like the content on there was valuable enough to go through this migration program. So that is not a bad option, and that works for some people. We have at Rolls-Royce, these are clients that I've worked with quite closely, what's called a parallel run. So we turn on Yammer, but we still have some of these legacy systems that we're not that hot on, and we don't necessarily want to get rid of them today because there's still valuable content on there, but we don't want to force migrate that for their jarring system. So the example here is they have engineers on engineering forums on old internet systems talking about really valuable stuff and literally how parts work in building engines. And so for them, turning it on and off was too jarring, and migrating the content over was too risky for the expertise and knowledge held in those groups. So they've turned on Yammer, and over the years, they're turning off platform by platform. They've got a lot of other stuff. And so as that increases, the problem with that, of course, is you pay more than one license fee at one time. There's also some confusion for the user around where I post my stuff. And also search is a big implication, because unless you do a lot of work, those searches are not going to work across the different platforms. So if you have today, you have SharePoint 2010 commenting on, and you have Yammer, and you have some other, I don't know, another social tool like Chatter on in the organization, for me to find an expertise, I have to search, keyword term search in those three platforms. So the user experience and the discussions that can come for it suffer. However, with that, the one good thing about that is you can really relax those timelines of when you turn off the old platforms. And then probably the most extreme in terms of the project team around it, but probably the best for me as a user, is that one day I log in and I get the notification saying, in 2 weeks' time, whatever I'm using today as a social platform is going to move to this social platform. And that includes moving from an old instance of Yammer, or if you're a big company that's bought another company and you want to move their Yammer data inside of you. For me, the tool doesn't change, but where the content lives and the URLs and the links all change. So in this one, I wake up and then the next day my content is posted into the new groups. So we can duplicate permissions, groups, members, content, and we post on behalf of that user. It's not a cheap process, so there's implications around the project team that you would have to put together, or a partner that you would have to bring in. But you can do it pretty quickly, and you can do it pretty successfully in moving people's stuff over. It's probably the gentlest on the user and the least gentle on the project team. Okay, so the decision you have to make here is how valuable is your content on your social platform today. If you've got commenting on from a really old intranet article page, that all of those articles are out of date, is it worth you migrating that content over for the search? Probably not. If you have a really active forum discussion where engineers are sharing, details around how you build our products and expertise, then you're probably going to be more onto this side. So if you decide to migrate and you want to use a tool, how am I doing for time? Excellent. If you want to use a tool, I've used some examples there. And when I say SharePoint 2010, I mean like custom commenting applications in there, Chatter, Jive, but essentially anything with an API we can plug into and recreate content on the user's behalf. So what it looks like is it gobbles up all the information from the previous tool and posts on the user's behalf. There are some differences, some quirks between different systems. I've listed a few here. none of these are show block. I've never been on a project where we've decided to migrate Yammer content over and someone's been like, actually, I really can't deal with the date stamp being wrong. So for example, when you post on Yammer, that date stamp that's at the bottom, you can't change that for love nor money. So that, you can appear in chronological order, but for example, that won't be correct. So there's workarounds, like you might enter a bit of text saying, originally posted in December 2012. None of these I consider showstoppers, but I said the talk's about considerations, and there are some for you. So the key elements of migrating the content with a tool would be, we would run a script that goes and talks to the tool that you're using today. So let's use Jive again. So it would come back to me and say, I've got 400 groups that nobody's used in 12 months. I've got 600 groups that are active with a certain amount of content. And then I might go back and we would decide a migration criteria. So we would say, okay, well, anything that's not been used over 12 months is probably not that useful for the user. So let's give that group owner an alert. And we can automate messaging through the old tools as well. So I would get a message saying, hey, we don't think your content has a place in the new world, but we'd really like you to enjoy the new tool, unless you can appeal that decision. So in some examples, we've done it sophisticated as, you will get a Yammer message, and you can confirm yes or no, and automatically our database knows whether that site should be migrated or not. And it's important to give users a chance to appeal that decision. Sometimes the criteria can be a bit off. I'll give you an example, is that one of our clients run their employee survey every 2 years. And so that group is dormant for 18 months when they don't run that survey, or the project team isn't running that survey. And so to us, it looks like a group that might not be worth taking, but actually in 6 months' time, that group is going to have a burst of activity again. So it's important to give users an opportunity to save that content. Excuse me one second. Okay. Now, if you've moved to Yammer from another tool, and there's lots and lots of talks about what makes a good Yammer launch and what makes a good Yammer adoption, but I wouldn't be doing it justice if I didn't include some tips. And I've got a fairly nice client story in here. So Network Rail look after the train tracks in England, and they are responsible for, they don't run the trains, but they make sure the routes run on time and smoothly, and the health and safety of those tracks. It's a big, big job. And they wanted to give, they have 6 routes across England, so that could be the Wales branch or right up from London to Edinburgh. And they would choose a route director for each of those, and then they had a layer of management above that. And they found that decision-making was hindered because the routes couldn't make their own decisions. If you're a route director in Network Rail, you're a big deal. And so they wanted to wipe away with kind of a layer of bureaucracy and a layer of hierarchy, but they still wanted ideation and sharing to go across the business. So Yammer was seen as a solution of that. They could give the route directors the local control they needed, but ideas and connectivity and best practice could be shared through Yammer. And so they said to us, look, here's, I think it was 60 days of time to go and do something impactful in our business. And we wanted to start at the top. And anyone you see give a talk about launching good Yammer, this should be their first bullet point, is exec sponsorship. So you start at the CEO, and then if they're not interested, you work your way down through till you found your good sponsor. And this is actually a picture of the CEO of Network Rail being trained. And what we do is we give them the mobile, and we never do it on desktop, and they just find pretty quickly they get buried into the network to find something useful for them. Should be the smartest people in your organization. We don't tell them what their agenda is. We just show them how Yammer can help them. And we train the top 100 leaders there. We started with the CEO, and then, of course, all of the other training. The first slide we show is a picture of the CEO having his training. So can you follow suit? That's really important. Number 2 would be training and champions. So this lady here, she went all the way from training the CEO to prefab shelters of signal boxes, guys in orange jackets who rake the gravel, to show them how Yammer could help them connect back into the business. We can only focus a certain amount of time. You can't train everybody in an organization, you know that already. It's just about picking the right people that can connect across your organization. And then the last one was just a steady heartbeat of communications that went through the business. And I think that often people mistake that point as in we have to be talking about Yammer all the time. We don't necessarily. Once you've got Yammer embedded, you should be talking about people or business impact or business objectives, whatever's important to your business. And Yammer is just the tool that does that. It almost becomes a footnote in what you're doing as a communications team. And it was a really good story. In 3 months, we had the active usage trebled. It's actually not quite trebled. Someone did point out with a BDI the other day, but close enough for me to say it was trebled. One of the really interesting things, as a small side note, but we did an analytics piece after this, and we found that initially we had really jumped the amount of people that were logging onto Yammer consuming data, but the actual people starting threads that were solving business problems wasn't as sharp as this increase, and that instead has taken a much longer time to increase, but still very much impacted by that boost. So, right on time. Is Yammer the right tool for you to migrate to? So just because you've got Yammer and you think it's a social platform you have today, doesn't mean that your users are using it in the way we can be using Yammer. So specifically consider teams, right? So if there's less than a couple of people in that group, less than 20, for example, that should be a red flag to consider that as more of a project team collaboration. Or if it's a capability across the organization, so anyone with project manager in their title, that's something you want to be broad and all-encompassing in your organization. So you would map Yammer on that map. Sorry, you would map the tools and the usage with Yammer on that map I showed you. Number 3 is how to migrate. Do you need to migrate it? Because it isn't a small task. It's really, if you've got valuable content that's important to your business, then you do need to do it. Otherwise, you could parallel run or do a straight swap. And only you can make that decision. It's not a third-party decision. You have to speak to your business to understand how useful that content is, not us. And then 4th is the all-important, and we've heard so much about it at the Yammer talks as well, so it's great to see it's just every year more and more on the agenda. It's a change and adoption piece around it. If you follow those 4 steps, you probably won't go too far wrong, and you'll be on your way to enjoying and exploiting Yammer. And that is me. Do we want to do questions? Do we have some questions? No, just some photos. That's cool. All right. All right, thank you very much. You can, oh, we got one. Oh, no, we got one, sorry. Go on. Did you have one? Hi, go on.
So, what are the migration tools? What are a few of the migration
He's asking me, what are the migration tools? So we have one that's custom built. There's not much on the market, so you look over and you see ShareGate, Metalogics for the SharePoint migration piece, but they're custom developed for us right now. There's no online tool that you could buy right now. So they're billed as services. There's about 3 people that I know of, including us, that can do it. 3 organizations that do social-to-social migrations, yeah. I'm sure there's some in the darker corners of the world that I don't know about. Yes, you, sir. What?
Discussions as live discussions or as flat PDFs, or do you have, what's your recommendation?
The question was, when you migrate into Yammer, do you migrate live discussions as PDFs, or what do they look like? They should look like as close as they were before. So really, Yammer's ultimate value is in those threads of discussion. So I would not recommend the usefulness of putting PDFs or files. If they've got files attached, those will come in the migration, but you want to closely replicate thread response. And the majority, all of the tools on the previous slide, they all have a similar setup that we can duplicate into Yammer, including Yammer to Yammer. That's the easiest one because that's just like for like. All right, guys, thanks for having me back to us. You can come and catch me at the end.